everybody. Welcome back to episode 4 of Soul Brothers Podcast. So if you joined us in the last episode, we started to break down the Beatitudes. We made it through blessed are the poor in spirit, or blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn, and blessed are the meek. And now that I at least alluded to blessed versus blessed, it might be a good time for you all to get your bingo cards out. As we move forward, we might play Christianese bingo.
Oh boy! So
as you
here we go.
As you start to hear any of the familiar terms, then please feel free to call out your number. So.
Right. We're going to do shots too. Like if we say, I don't know, take a shot of grape juice.
Yeah, communion shots.
Yeah, so. Exactly.
All right. So if you wondered what blessed actually means, you pretty much heard it. I think there's a lot of joy here and contentment. Yes. So, with that, let's just jump into the next one, Nathan. And by the way, I'm Keith, and I'm here with
Nathan.
If you haven't heard us before, congratulations, you're hearing us now.
Your life will be changed.
So the next one is, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. So Nathan, break that down. I mean, it seems to make sense on the surface,
right? But
is there more to it?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I think first of all we need to point out, which I didn't point out in all the other blesseds, is blessed are. In other words, this is a present tense verb. So we're talking about not blessed will be someday, like not happy will be when you die. Like this is absolute unbelievable joy wrapped up in contentment right now. Blessed are.
Immediately.
Right now. Yeah. Blessed are those. And that's how it is the entire time. So this is a present tense. Like this isn't like someday later you're going to be happy. Like this is supposed to be right now. This is our ongoing current experience in reality.
So it's present tense, but it's also ongoing.
Correct. Yeah. It's what you call present active. So in the Greek you have a present active. So it's like it's has a beginning and then it goes on indefinitely.
Okay.
So, yes.
So break it down for us. Tell us about hungering and thirsting for righteousness.
Well, again, he's describing what has happened to you. So, in other words, now that this is who you are, like you've realized you're poor in spirit, you had this encounter with the living God, this massive hunger for righteousness and this thirst for right. So he uses two things, hunger and thirst, meaning you want like the things you have to chew on and the stuff you can drink right away.
Yeah.
But in any case, you are desperately going after this dikaiosune, which is like righteousness. So you're hungry and thirsting for the perfect because you've encountered the perfect, is what he's saying.
Okay.
So one of the things I think that gets unfortunate, though, is almost like I see hunger being elevated beyond satisfaction. So I think that's a problem sometimes. We talk a lot in the church about hunger. Like, are you hungry? Which is so weird to me. Like sometimes I'll sit in some of these meetings, and of like, especially conferences, and they're like, "Are you guys hungry?" I'm like, "Dude, everyone in here paid $50 to like." And they, someone like flew from China, and drove all night long, and like they left their stepkid on the porch to like get here, And it's like, of course we're hungry. Like, what are you yelling at us for?
Yeah, nobody's sitting in the audience saying, I'm pretty full.
Yeah, like actually, I'm not really hungry for God at all. Like, I mean, if I wasn't hungry for God, I wouldn't stink and be here.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just such a weird thing. But I think it's unfortunate those things even get asked because they, originally I'm trained as a psychologist, right? So I know what that does to people. Like when you ask the question, it puts into them a doubt that maybe I'm not hungry. But anyway, that's not really the point. The point I think is sometimes we elevate this idea of being hungry, but we don't realize we should be totally satisfied at the same time. So it's like this. It's a literal. It happens simultaneously. So even the way this is worded, like it's like blessed are those. In other words, the happiness of those who are absolutely hungry and completely satisfied at the same time.
So is it that you can't get enough of it? I mean, that's really what it is. It's not that you're satisfied, but because the desire is there, you just naturally can't get enough.
It's like the four living creatures. It's the holy, holy, holy. It's like they're going around going holy, and it never gets old.
Yeah,
right.
Not because they have to.
No. It's coming because they're having an encounter. They are actually seeing. That's why they have eyes all over. Is because that's why it describes as having eyes all over, so they can see more. And even with all those eyes, that they have eyes all around, right? Which means they literally can see everything all the time. Even with that, all they can say is holy, holy, holy. So this is like you're completely hungry and you're satisfied, but it's happening at the same time. It's like this absolute hunger and absolute satisfaction. See, if you're just hungry and never being satisfied, you're actually living in unbelief. Like that's all you have is just hunger, but you don't have a peace, which is he's going to talk about later. Like then you haven't actually gone there. You don't actually yet see. Like you're not actually mourning over the right things. You're mourning in despair and you're mourning in unbelief, which means at some level you've lacked a revelation of the Father's love.
So I'm not intentionally trying to do an eisegesis here.
Yes,
if I'm using it in the right way.
Yeah.
Is there a reason here that he talks about? I mean, if you look at to me, it looks like a pattern where you've got poor in spirit, that's internal. You've got mourning, which gets to emotion and perhaps thought. You get to meek, which bridges thought to body, but hunger and thirst generally are directed toward physical, and it's also more of it at least suggests nourishment and sustenance.
Yes.
Is that intentional?
I think it is. I mean, I think that he's trying to say like that desire for something you're lacking, right? And it's only found in one place.
Okay.
But then you're still hungry even after you eat. But the more you eat, the more you're satisfied, and the more you eat, the more you're hungry. So again, hunger is very good thing, but hunger outside satisfaction is not a good thing. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So we have so many people who are just hungry and hungry and hungry, and they don't realize they're constantly hungry, that most people will shut down. I mean, I don't know if you know, even physically this happens. Like where if you're hungry for long enough, what happens? Like you just kind of stop being hungry.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of shuts down, and people's spirits kind of do that if they have not had any satisfaction, because all they're being fed is religion or nonsense or emotionality. They're not actually being fed the depths of who God actually is and the Father's love.
True nourishment.
Yes. Then they're going to just hunger, but they'll never be satisfied. And you're not supposed to be satisfied when you die. You're supposed to be satisfied right now. So in the happiness of that satisfaction in Christ.
So this does not suggest an action or an activity or a behavior necessarily. It seems to me to reflect a mental and heart state.
Yes.
More than anything. It's more of a reaction to now where your heart is.
Yes.
Correct? And if that's the case, tell us, like, what might that look like today? Because you've kind of touched on it a little bit with the way this could be taught, where it's you shouldn't have the satisfaction. You're not really hungry if you're ever satisfied.
Right.
That leads to certain behaviors, and it would look a certain way. How should this really look? How might this look?
Well, let's start with how it probably shouldn't look.
Okay.
So let me just ask you, because you have a lot more experience in this religious area than I do, being only a year here. But I would ask you.
I'm a seasoned veteran.
Yes, you are. So let's pretend I'm random preacher guy, and I get up in front of you and I start saying things like, "You're not really hungry unless."
Yeah.
And then I give you this list of things. What would those things be?
Yeah, automatically it's got to be you didn't pray enough. Mm-hmm. You certainly didn't Bible study and journal. Mm-hmm. By the way, bingo card.
Take a shot of grape juice.
Journal is it. Like I have these visions when people talk about journaling, it's total aside, of Jesus resting on the mountainside, kicked back with a nice little
with like a quill and some parchment.
Exactly. A quill and some parchment, a little communion juice on the side, just
Unfermented
reflecting
wine.
on his thoughts and, journaling them out, but anyway. But yeah, if you're not doing that, if you don't wake up every day, by the way, at an extremely early hour, if you're not up before the sun is, then you are not up early enough to do these things, to pray, to to read, to journal. And it doesn't matter, by the way, if you're truly reading it to understand, or you're truly reading it to know who Jesus is.
Yeah.
That's not the issue. The issue is that you're reading.
Did you perform your religious
duty?
Exactly.
Okay. And then perhaps, you got to show up to X number of services.
Right. You better serve and volunteer.
When the QR code comes up now, it used to be passing the plate. Now the QR code, you got to make sure you scan it and give. And
you're not really hungry.
Exactly.
You don't perform all those acts. So this has actually been taught to you, like from the pulpit on occasions?
I have either directly or sometimes indirectly. It's been implied. Okay. Actually, now it seems to be more implied in places that I've been.
Okay.
Than directly taught.
Yeah.
It's more of a suggestion of,
you're not really hungry.
You didn't go to 15 conferences last week or last month. Well, come on, man.
Right. Well, let's look at some realities. Like, in other words, like we talked about this before, where I don't know how many kids came to the Lord in the revival that we had, like hundreds and hundreds, like maybe even thousands. I don't actually have the numbers, but a lot of kids came to the Lord, and they came because they were hungry for the Lord.
Yeah.
So here's the deal. None of them were reading their Bibles. None of them were doing any of that. In fact, their hunger was manifesting in drugs. I mean, their hunger was manifesting in alcohol, sexual addictions. Their hunger was manifesting in listening to ICP. So I don't know if you know this, like a lot of our kids, we had a huge revival in ICP. If you don't know what that is, it's Insane Clown Posse. Yeah. It was in that time.
I had to look it up after you told me last time.
Yeah, so it was at that time. It was it was early zeros. So it was like the very popular band, which is really two guys, but it was like this very popular band, if you want to call it that. And they have this huge following. So if you're a guy, you're called a juggalo. If you're a girl, you're a juggalette. And if you're kind of like a wannabe, you're like a jug-a-hoe. So I learned all this stuff when I I don't know if that's appropriate. Anyway,
it's a whole different bingo card.
Yeah, it probably totally is. But anyway, they had this thing called Shangri-La. So they weren't just a band with music; they had entire theology, and in there they put their theology into their music.
Really?
Yeah. So their heaven was called Shangri-La, and they had certain ways by which you could achieve Shangri-La that they laid out in their music. So it was much more than it was a cult. I mean, the whole thing was a following. It was very spiritual. So these kids were hungry for God, and they were finding that spiritual hunger, at least part of it, in ICP and in their music and in the theology that was coming forth. So one of the things that actually spurred the revival is the very last line of the very last song. I think it was in 2002 when their last album came out, said, "Go find God." Like literally in this thing. And a lot of juggalos ended up going to churches, but a lot of churches just turned them away. And they missed, and we had hundreds of them like coming on fire because they were seeking God. But again, that's how their hunger manifested. Look at the hippies, the 1960s, 70s, same thing. Like their hunger wasn't manifested by journaling. Like their hunger was manifested by drugs. They were trying to find something. They were hungry for God. Now, it may have been obviously all off. So they weren't hungering for righteousness in that sense necessarily, but I still think they were. Because if they're hungering for God, they're hungering for righteousness. I mean, that's what they're really hungering for. They're just, oh, this is appropriate. He's called Wookin' Panub. In other words, like, do you remember that song, like, looking for love and all that? Remember that Saturday Night Live
you just went Eddie Murphy?
Yes,
man.
I went Eddie Murphy. Was
great.
Like, looking for love and all the one pace, anyway, I used to joke with the youth that they're looking for nub, like they're all looking for love. They're all hungry for that righteousness. So it can manifest in lots of different ways, but when they began to seek, they came and they found the Lord. Blessed are those who hunger. So those who really were hungering and thirsting, for righteousness, they found it, and they were on fire. I mean, they're still on fire today. A lot of them are on fire right now. In fact, one of them lives only about an hour and a half from here, has his own podcast. He's totally on fire for the Lord.
Wow.
So he was the biggest juggalo we had.
And no more face paint, I'm assuming.
No more face paint. But man, Halloween parties were fun. Every kid comes as a clown. If you guys don't know ICP, that will not be funny to you. But Anyways,
went to McDonald's and met Ronald. And
oh my goodness me, it got scary, especially when they showed up in church on Sunday morning with that makeup, which did happen.
Did they really?
Oh yeah, like one day I just invited the kids. Like my dad was like, "Hey, you got like 200 kids coming. Like, why don't you invite them to come Sunday morning?" A lot of the kids didn't even know. They thought that was the church. They thought like the youth group was the church. Like there wasn't anything else.
Really?
Yeah, they had no idea. You have to understand, it was packed. Like it was hundreds of kids on Thursday night. They had no idea there was anything else going on. Like in the building or that it was even part of a church. They had no clue. It was like, this is where God is. So, So anyway, one day I was like, "Hey guys, there's the actual church here. Like there's a service on Sunday morning." And then they heard like, "Oh, we're doing this again on Sunday morning. Like we can go seek God, like we do here on Sunday morning." Well, they just came as they were. 2 or 3 kids came in full makeup, with their hatchet men on their arms and like tattooed hatchet men and stuff. And that was fun. That was fun morning. Had a couple of older ladies that were a little perturbed, I think. They came all the way down to the front because that's how we did it,
Yeah.
So 80 kids come, that first Sunday, packed the whole front of the sanctuary. They've got piercings everywhere, wearing black tattooed tears down their cheeks. Girls wearing like, it was summertime, so girls wearing like nothing. And I'll never forget. It's one of those moments that I think I don't know if this is getting too tangenty off of this. Is this okay?
No, not at all. Go ahead.
So
I believe people want to hear the rest of this.
This is one of my most favorite moments of my entire life. Like these are kind of moments that you can't orchestrate. Like you pray for and thank God when they come. But like I'll never forget this lady. She was very mad at me. Because the girls, first of all, were dressed inappropriately, which I was like, "Would you like to buy them new clothes?" Like these are, I say that to people. I'm like, this is the clothes that they have. Like these are our kids. Like, they don't know anything. They
did not go shopping specifically to attend today.
Exactly. And they would look at me like, she actually said this to me, like, "How could you let them dress like that?" And I was like, I'm not at home telling them how they need to dress like before they come here. But anyways, I'll never forget, she was going off. She had her Bible open to Leviticus about can't get any piercings, right? Piercings are naughty. And because a lot of the kids had piercings, and like really dramatic ones, like gauges in their ears and all that. And so I remember she was so mad, like her face was red. She's reading it, and as she's going off about the piercings, I start dingling my ear. Like I take my finger and I'm just like kind of dingling my earlobe, and I'm like doing this and looking at her, and I just keep on doing it. And she finally stops. She goes, "What are you doing?" Like she's super mad at me. I probably wouldn't do this now, but I was like 27 and I didn't care. And so she goes, "What are you doing with your ear?" I go, "What do you have in your ear right there?" And she goes, what? And I go, "That looks like a piercing." And she, oh man, rah, 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 rah. That slams her Bible shut and runs. This is one of those moments where I was like, I guess it's okay for you to pierce your ear, but these kids can't pierce their nose. Like, what's the difference? So yeah, that was fun.
So when, back in the town that I lived in forever in Alabama, there was a church that for the longest had a the billboards they put out front.
Yeah.
I don't even know what they're called. They're not billboards.
They changed the words on them.
Yeah,
and stuff.
Which for some people is as close as they get to a message from the Lord, right?
Yeah, that's probably
Let's
true.
drive by and see
the only scripture we ever see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It for the longest time had dress code required.
It actually said that on there?
It actually said that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, they were on fire.
Well, there it is.
There you go. So it's a real thing.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, like, hungering and thirsting for righteousness doesn't have to necessarily look like we may think that it looks. It could be that it manifests in spiritual disciplines, and oftentimes it probably does, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's the way that the scripture isn't even addressing that. It's just saying that the contentment of those who are so hungry for the righteousness and the holiness of the Lord, assuming they also have had some sort of revelation of that.
And it's more about what you're hungry for, what you desire. Yeah. It's the righteousness.
Yes, it's like, what are you hungering for? What do you desire? And he's assuming that this is what the kingdom of God looks like, right? Yeah. In other words, this is like he's describing the reality of the kingdom of God. So he's like, of course you're going to hunger for righteousness. Like this is who you are. This is what we do. You're going to hunger for it because it's who you are. Like. In other words, you're transformed into righteousness. That's what you're going to hunger for.
So it also seems to imply that if you can hunger and thirst, there's an intake, right? Mm-hmm. When you eat or drink anything, if you're hunger and thirst for righteousness, it implies that you can be filled
Yes.
with righteousness.
That's right. Well, satisfaction is, that word is like to be filled.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not like satiated. It's to be filled with that righteousness that you seek.
Awesome. And they shall be satisfied. So let's move to the next one. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Break that down for us.
Yep. Well, this is a good time if you want to talk about like mercy versus grace.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, I don't know how many people are. This is kind of a common teaching now, but at least I've heard it a couple times. But maybe people who are listening haven't. So, just so you know the difference, like grace has two different meanings, but we'll only talk about one, which is grace is basically unmerited favor, so you get what you don't deserve. So if you think about it in terms of a cop pulling you over, which is, I've heard this example, which I like it. I think it's a pretty good example. So mercy would be like if you break the law, you're going 90 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone, and the cop pulls you over. Mercy is he comes up to the window and goes, you know, you're crying. And he goes, I'd probably cry. But anyways, and he goes, Mr. Sanford, like, pull yourself together. I'm going to let you off, right? I'm going to show mercy. So grace would be like, I'm doing 90, same situation in a 30-mile-an-hour zone, and I'm crying again, and the cop pulls me over, and he comes up and he goes, hey, here's $1,000 for speeding. I mean, that's what grace is. So grace is actually
wow.
Like, yeah, that's literally what grace is.
I would rather have grace.
Oh, definitely. But but that's basically what this is, merciful, meaning showing that mercy. But it's not. It's just, I think people look at it. I don't want people to read these because it's not posited like that at all. Like in the context, it's not what Jesus is saying. In terms of it's not positive. I don't want people to read these as like, these are moral codes.
Yeah.
Because that's not it. He's not saying like, here's moral codes by which you need to strive to live by. He's describing a kingdom reality. So he's saying like, in the kingdom, you are merciful, and therefore you will receive mercy because it's who you are. Like, that's what he's saying. He's not like, try to be merciful. Like, that isn't at all the tone of it. That isn't the structure of the Greek at all. Blessed are the merciful. They're super content. Not going to be. They're super content. They're super happy. Because why? Because they'll receive mercy. And it's like that's who they are. So of course they're showing mercy, meaning like, I'm not going to, this is now who I am. I'm going to go love freely and release any offense. I mean, it has to do with offense, has to do with forgiveness, has to do with all of that stuff.
So being merciful doesn't necessarily mean toward any one individual. It just simply means an approach to everything.
Everything. Mm-hmm. This is not like people. I mean, definitely people, but it's an approach to your whole life. It's who you are. You are merciful.
And so what does that actually look like? I mean, I get the speeding example, which I thought was great, but like, what if somebody is merciful in their every moment, in their every thought, in their every action? What does that actually look like to reflect being merciful?
Well, I think it's a couple of things, but I think one of the things we should look at is also one of the things I see a lot of believers whose hearts are totally before the Lord is merciful toward yourself.
Okay.
I mean, I honestly think that this is one of the biggest things that I see, and I'm not sure this.
So no self-hatred, no self.
Right. Like, but I mean, I've seen so many believers because their hearts are so broken before the Lord. They love Jesus so much, and they're after him so much, and they screw up, as all of us inevitably do, because they don't know who they are in Christ, and because they're under a spirit of religion, they don't show themselves mercy, and so they don't receive God's mercy. Not that God isn't giving it to them, and that, you know what I'm saying, in the sense of he's obviously being merciful towards them, but they are not receiving it as a felt reality, and therefore they're not being blessed because they can't, because like the religion won't let them let it go.
Is that being perpetuated by the whole sin nature?
Yes,
thought.
Absolutely. And by the pray more, serve more, do more, like that kind of a message, which is awesome in the Father's love. But without the Father's love foundation, those messages become prisons for which, when you can't do enough, you wake up guilty and shameful, and you can't even show yourself mercy until you work enough to be like, oh gosh, I missed 3 fasting days or 3 journaling days or 3 prayer days, and now I'm just, oh man. And now you can't even show yourself mercy until you perform, which is the opposite of what mercy is.
Okay, so with that though, I can see how it would be possible to read this as blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. I could see how someone could read that as I can't receive mercy unless I am merciful, but which turns it completely into a performance-based salvation or performance-based, action or what have you, right? It's more of I have to perform this way or to act a certain way in order to receive it. And if I don't, I won't receive it. So I'm left out of this blessing.
So that's not
what's happening, right?
Well, let me ask you the question. How do we know that's not true? How do we know that's absolutely not true? In other words, how can we know that can't be what this means? In other words, like, how can we know that, like, until you perform mercy acts, you will not receive mercy? How can we know that?
Okay, so I'm going to give you 3 answers to that right off the bat. Probably starting with the very cornerstone that we began with in the very first Beatitude. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
There's one cornerstone.
Automatically, we know that it's not you. It can't be anything because you are incapable of anything outside of the Lord.
That's correct.
Right? There's no way you could achieve that level of righteousness.
Yes.
Okay, which automatically flows to the next one, which is why you're mournful, because you also realize that's the state of nature, and which would skip over to even to hunger and thirst for righteousness. The second thing is, I think to me it ties directly into blessed are the meek, and what you broke down about that for us. It's having all the power and knowing, because of who the Lord has now made you to be, that you have the power.
Yes.
And it's being able to constrain that because you know there's something to be constrained. If that's the case, to me, that would coincide with merciful, because you have the ability. It's now naturally who you are, is being merciful. And then the third way is because of the very first word and how you broke it down in present tense, ongoing. Blessed are. It doesn't say blessed will be in the future
At some
state.
point. Yeah.
It's saying you're automatically this way now because it's the creation you were made to be, and a reflection of Jesus. And if that's the case, then being merciful is just a natural extension of this new creation, which just returns to you because that's who you are as a creation. Am I wrong about this?
No, absolutely right. And let's go beyond. Remember, because hermeneutics demands that when Jesus teaches something, we put it into the context of Jesus' ministry.
Okay.
So every time he teaches, we can't rip it out of his ministry. So a lot of times people will take a teaching like this, especially because so many people read the Bible through a religious lens, and it's not usually their fault. Like, usually they're taught by religious people. So from pulpits, everything gets filtered through a religious lens. And of course, religious lenses are always perform, give to get, perform so God can forgive you, do everything right so that God can bless you. Like, that's what the religious lens is in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it than that. But so they read this and go, gosh, God can't even show me mercy until I'm merciful. So now I have to perform this act. But let's just take a look at a couple things. So we have the thief on the cross as part of Jesus' ministry. The thief on the cross, did the thief show mercy to anybody?
Which one?
The one that went to heaven.
The one that went to heaven?
Yeah. Did he show mercy? Did he even have the opportunity to do so?
Well, no, I don't think so, unless what you count is the fact that when he realized who Christ really was in that moment, it hit him, then I think the implication is that it was heart impact, but I don't know if you can call that mercy.
I wouldn't call. I'd be a stretch to call that mercy at all. He was never even in a position by which to actually do anything. Right? In other words, he wasn't in a position to do any of these. If he could perform any of these, he wasn't in a position to ever do anything. And Jesus says, "Today you will be with me in paradise." You see what I mean? So when you look at his ministry, like when he says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what." Do you think he's kidding? Like, was that not a legitimate prayer? Like, I think that was a legitimate prayer.
Yeah.
And I think the Father does what Jesus asks him to do. Yeah. I mean, I would be surprised if that wasn't the case. So, like, Father, forgive them. Did they show mercy? Were the people killing him showing mercy at any level? No. And yet Jesus says, Father, forgive them, meaning show them mercy on these ones who have shown none. So my point is we have to always look at Jesus' ministry to understand his teaching. You can't rip his teaching from his ministry. You can't rip his ministry from his teaching. So you always have to look at all of that to be able to go, okay, what does this really mean? So and then, of course, then later on, Paul expounds, in Romans and Ephesians and Galatians about the theology of what actually is occurring, here, so that we can look at this and go, yes, what he's saying is you have nothing. I will transform you into living mercy. You become the merciful. Wow. So, of course, you're going to show mercy. Of course, blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. In other words, he's saying, I'll transform you into mercy. That's how you're receiving it. Like how you're receiving mercy is by becoming it.
Wow. So is receiving then, in that case, does it not necessarily mean that you're going to be shown mercy by others, but receiving is you're filled with mercy?
Yes. It doesn't mean you'll necessarily be shown mercy by others. I mean, Jesus was not shown mercy. Paul was not shown, a lot of people have not been shown mercy.
Read the list of what happened to the apostles.
Yes, exactly. Like they were not shown mercy on multiple occasions. So it's not that. It's you are mercy. That's who you are.
Wow. Okay, so going into the next one. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. What is pure in heart?
That is I have a lot of different ideas on this. Of course, I've read numerous commentaries on this concept, but think about it in this way. So let's again marry it to the ministry, and then let's marry it to Paul's theology.
Okay.
So if we're going to do that, how does one become? Now, pure in heart does literally mean like perfect in heart, or meaning every single motive you have is 100% genuine and good. So if you want to just start with that, like for say, blessed are pure in heart, that means cardia, which in their minds were like the core of you. Mm-hmm. So like cardia is like this, of course, for cardiology and stuff like that, but it's like this pure, the center of you, the core of you. This is who you are. Okay. So blessed are the pure in the core, the pure, the perfect. Like every single motive you have, every single thing driving you is absolutely pure and perfect and holy. If that's the case, you can see God. So then you have to ask yourself, how does one become that or achieve that?
So pure in heart is the opposite of people who are deceitful.
Pharisees.
Opposite of, okay.
I mean, basically, yeah.
Who really seek their own glory.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Who are seeking anything other than absolute broken, laid down love.
Okay.
If it's anything other than that, it's not pure. Like every motive of the heart is pure. Every motive driving you is coming from a pure place of broken, laid down love.
So to me, this is perhaps the one.
Well, sorry, add one more thing to that. It's not just the motive, it's the condition. So the way this is worded, like the pure in heart, it's like the motive of the heart and the condition of the heart must be perfect and pure.
Explain condition of the heart.
Ontological state. So in other words, like not only must the motives be, the nature must be.
Okay. So
the nature of the core of you must be absolutely perfect in every way and pure in order to see God.
So this is the one beatitude, if we go back to our discussion earlier about even tying to the first one, the poor in spirit, when you realize it can't be you.
Yes.
There's no way it can be you. Mm-hmm. It is only Jesus. Going back to our discussion of works-based versus faith-based salvation message, there's no way you cannot change your heart.
That's the point he's making. See, do you see what he's doing?
Yeah.
See, Jesus is building on this because he's trying to tell them, like, you have to have every single motive of your heart be pure, and your ontological state, theological word, like your actual state of your heart must be absolutely perfect if you want to see God. Period. And so he's trying to make the point, like, again, this is how the kingdom works. can't do this. You cannot do this.
Yeah, he's
like,
the only one who can.
He's the only one who can. Like, there is absolutely no way that you could possibly do this. He's like, he's trying to paint this picture again to them that, like, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. See, he's saying the same thing.
Yeah.
He's like saying, in other words, he's saying, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. You cannot see the Father
without
but
him.
through me. In other words, that's literally through. Like, people think like somehow he's the mechanism. I think the way people, this is maybe a tangent too, but like people think somehow Jesus is the mechanism, like through like a telescope. But it's you can't see you can't come to the Father but through him. Meaning, like, here's Jesus, here's the Father. The Father sees you through.
Yeah, you
Jesus.
Can't see one without the other.
Right, you see Jesus you see the Father through Jesus.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like that. It's the same thing. It's like you can't see God unless you're absolutely perfect and pure, both ontologically and motivationally. And how does that happen?
So, all right. So, what does it mean to see God?
That is a loaded word right there. So when you see the word see, it doesn't necessarily literally mean like visually.
Okay.
It's to apprehend, to have revelation of. The word is like apprehend, reveal, like encounter.
Okay.
So hard to put it in English. I don't know.
Is it more of a knowing on a personal level?
Yes, but that is so small.
Okay.
Of a word to use. It would be experience, encounter.
Okay.
Step into. Okay, here's a better sort of way to do this. On Avatar, they totally stole this from native culture. So in Osage, it was the same way. Like there was a word, I can't remember what the word is, but it means like I see you, like I know you, but it doesn't mean like I physically see you. It means like I experience you, like I see you. Okay. Like I see you, Keith. Like I see beyond this. Like I actually encounter you. I'm like I am one with you. Like
there's a greater depth.
Yes, and that's what he's saying here. Like I see you, like beyond that. It's like I encounter you. Like there's not a good English word for it. That's why I'm struggling, because like there's just not a good English word to actually convey what he's trying to say here.
So here's why I asked for you to give a little more definition to that, or to explain that a little bit more. So I don't know if you do this, but like I'll flip through Facebook and you see the reels that come up, or I guess they're reels, not TikToks, but anyway, right? You see the guys that are out there, and they're the street preachers and the people who are trying to teach people or to convey the message, right? And generally, the ones that they show are where they're being challenged by people who are agnostic or atheist or whatever you want to call them, or whatever they are. And so I remember there was this one, and I've actually seen this more than once, this argument of how can you see God, and yet in Torah, in the Old Testament, where you've got, Moses didn't see his face, right?
Yeah, he looked at his tush.
Yeah, right.
That's what it says. Looked at God's booty as he walked by. Yeah.
Because you couldn't look upon his face, or you're kaput. Right. So if that's the case, then how could you see him now? Right, and that I've heard that argument used in various ways. Like I've even heard, I want to say that I've heard Jewish people say, if Jesus is God, is the Son of God, then how could you look upon him, because you're not, right? So I've heard that in different ways. So that's why I wanted to know truly what this is truly telling us about seeing God.
Well, and again, it is saying that, because even it says no one can see God and live, right? That's what the Old Covenant says. well, that must mean something must have happened for him, Jesus, to say this.
Okay.
Because this is the same word, see God, in the
Okay.
Septuagint. And so we have to assume that it's the same thing. So he's saying, blessed are the pure in heart, they shall see God. I mean, he's being extremely radical here, like to make this statement in front of Jewish people. Like, because every single one of them is going to know blasphemer. I mean, every one of them that's hearing this is going to think this is blasphemy. Like, first of all, nobody's pure in heart. And second of all, nobody can see God. I mean, the whole statement is blasphemy at multiple levels. So for them, and again, remember the context of the Beatitudes is he was trying to scare people away. So, because remember, this is like a big crowd gathered.
Yeah.
And as soon as Jesus sees there's a big crowd, he always goes radical. Whenever there's a big crowd, he's like, "Eat me and drink my blood." I mean, that's what he does. He says something crazy. They're just like, "Whoa,
Crank it up."
Yes, this is like church shrink formula. Like, how do we get people not to listen to Jesus? Like, drink my blood. Like, dude, you're out of your freaking mind. Like, that's a crazy thing to do. And he does the same thing here. Like, he's saying in the middle of this, while all these people are because he sits, which is normal for a rabbi would usually sit and everybody else would stand.
Yeah.
So he sits down and begins to go, pure in heart and see God. Like, I guarantee you, like, these people are going like, this guy's false teacher, like false prophet. I mean, that's what's going, stone him. I mean, this is like, nobody can do that. So the fact that he's making this statement is a radical statement. Like, he's saying something has changed.
Yeah.
Like, something big.
There's a new paradigm.
There's a new paradigm, and it has to do with the kingdom of God, because that's what his message was over and over and over and over. The kingdom of God. And something about the coming of the kingdom of God has so radically changed things that you can actually be pure in heart and you can see God. That's totally nuts, and like not what they were thinking at all.
Wow.
That's the case.
So when non-Pharisees would have heard this, how would the normal person have taken this?
Probably utter confusion.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, like, your average Israelite would have just been like, "What in the world?" and probably walked away, which of course they did with the drinking blood.
Yeah.
Whatever. We don't have that evidence here, but I imagine it probably did happen. I mean, it would have been confusion. It would have been like, "What? See God? Like, what is he talking about?
Yeah.
Pure in heart? What does it even mean?" I mean, this is not normal. Like, this would have been a radical new paradigm for them.
Wow.
Again, like I've talked about, maybe we talked about in a future one, actually, this is what a wineskin actually is. Remember, like a wineskin.
I can't wait to talk about that one.
Remember, a wineskin, we'll get maybe into this later at some point, but like, a wineskin is not church structure. It's not like small groups in a house versus like a big meeting in a church building. Like, that's not a wineskin. Yeah. It's like, I don't know where people got these crazy ideas.
Not a new delivery methodology.
No, it's not a new like liturgy or way to like do church or something. Like, a new wineskin is this. Like, Jesus is positing a new wineskin. He's like, this is a totally new paradigm, a totally new way to think, and I'm describing to a new paradigm, which is what we desperately need right now.
But if you look at all of the ones leading up to it, they've really kind of set the stage for that statement.
Mm-hmm. They absolutely have.
So there's no way I don't think that he could have flipped that and said that first. Because you'd have to know that you'd have to be poor in spirit. You'd have to mourn. You'd have to hunger for righteousness. You'd have to be meek and merciful and all that before you get to the point of pure in heart and seeing God.
That's absolutely right.
So, I mean, it indicates to me that, I mean, obviously we know this, but Jesus was strategic.
Strategery.
Yeah, strategery. So yes. he knew what he was doing. Can you imagine?
He did.
So, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. So,
that's an idiom right there, just so you know.
So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to leave it with that, and I'm going to tease it. That's where we're going to start the next episode with this idiom, which we might even jump into there, right?
All right.
Because you've got in Scripture, you've got idioms and you've got foreshadowings and you've got all sorts of things.
Lots of figures of speech. Yeah.
So, I can't wait to. So we have a few left here, but this really brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much, everybody, for spending this time with us. I know that I've enjoyed it. Hopefully you have, and you've learned something. please, again, when we post these, feel free to comment, send us feedback through Facebook. You can send it to Unleashed. You can send it to Rock Salt on our Facebook page. Anything that you want to hear about, that you want to hear Nathan break down and us discuss, please let us know.
Keith's got a lot he's bringing, so let's don't be meek. Let's
Okay, on no false humility.
Yes.
So, all right. So there we go. So, no, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate the time. We can't wait till the next episode, and we'll see you then.